On to Sri Lanka now. For weeks, we have been talking about the economic crisis there. Colombos' foreign exchange reserves have been dangerously low. The fears of a default were growing, and today, those fears have come true. Sri Lanka says it will stop paying its international creditors. Payments will be halted. Sri Lanka will use whatever money it has for essential food items and fuel imports. It is an unprecedented step. What exactly will a default mean for Sri Lanka? How will it cope with the growing challenges? Where will the money come from? Tonight on Gravitas, we will get to these answers, starting with the most obvious question: what does Colombos' decision really mean? Earlier today, we received a statement from the Sri Lankan Ministry of Finance. It says that Colombo will stop servicing its external debts. Payments to creditors are being suspended. That means Sri Lanka will not pay its upcoming installments. It is willing to default if it comes to that. Sri Lanka's external debt is around $51 billion. Out of this, about $7 billion is due this year. Sri Lanka is halting payments towards these. Colombo had less than $2 billion in its reserves by the end of March. Clearly, that's not enough to cover any debt payments. So what kind of loans are we talking about here? This includes all outstanding bonds in global capital markets, all government-to-government credits, basically loans extended by countries, all foreign exchange loans or credit facilities with commercial banks, and loans from multilateral lenders. Do the creditors have any options to get their money back? Yes, they do. They could opt to be paid in Sri Lankan rupees. Sri Lanka's central bank governor says they want to avoid a hard default. The pause on payments is temporary, but if Sri Lanka fails to make even one payment, there will be a default. And that would be a first. Since its independence in 1948, Sri Lanka has never defaulted on a debt obligation. Nothing can be more embarrassing for a country than a default. But as they say, desperate times call for desperate measures. Sri Lanka's finance ministry said this move is the last resort. When will Colombo resume paying its creditors? It's difficult to say right now. Sri Lanka needs a bailout from the International Monetary Fund. It is also talking to its creditors to restructure its debt. A lot will depend on how these conversations go. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa tried to reassure the Sri Lankans yesterday. Listen in.
Before carrying out major reforms, everyone's responsibility is to save this country from this destruction. For that, we have already invited everyone who has the courage and the strength to do that. The country needs everybody's patience and courage at this moment. Even though it can't be done in 2 or 3 days, we are working to end this crisis as soon as possible. Every minute you protest in the streets, we lose our ability to earn dollars.
Every minute you protest in the streets, we lose dollars. That was Rajapaksa's message to the demonstrators. They did not listen clearly. The protesters are now camping outside the presidential secretariat. That's the office of the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the brother of Mahinda Rajapaksa. Our correspondent, Dasoni Athoda, has been tracking those protests. She got us this ground report earlier. Take a look.
Even as the Central Bank of Sri Lanka today notified of its intention to not pay any foreign debt until further notice and to look into possibilities of debt servicing here in Sri Lanka, protesters still continue to gather in their thousands here near the presidential secretariat, as you can see right behind me, with the pure intention of letting people know that they still do want the Rajapaksa-led government to step down, and none of the decisions that were made as of recent is good enough for the people of Sri Lanka. Reporting for WION World is one from Colombo. I'm Dasani Athoda.
The bailout talks begin next week. The terms of a bailout could cause even more anger against the Rajapaksas. Back in March, the International Monetary Fund made some tough recommendations. It wants Colombo to raise taxes as well as the fuel prices. Already, Sri Lanka's economic situation has triggered a political crisis. Price hikes will only worsen the situation. Sri Lanka faces difficult times ahead, and this crisis is not ending anytime soon. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.